Howdy, class, and welcome to today's lecture. It's a sort of a continuation about child protection, but today we're going to talk about some of the legal mandates, uh, specifically referred to the ADA, Child Protection, and Title IX, and how those are going to affect your camps. So, the purpose of this presentation is to identify the guiding legislation. So, that's what a legal mandate is. It's legislation related to these three areas. And legal mandates happen on the state and federal level, and they may require that you follow and train your staff in specific ways related to child protection. Any youth serving organization receiving funds must follow the law regarding these areas. So let's talk about specifically camps and programs for minors defined by the state law. So programs for minors are sponsored or operated by members of third parties using member property and facilities. So if you were put on a camp, specifically if you took a organization to a camp, so you were using them as a third party, that's where that would come in. Where the full supervisory duties of the minor is the member or third party's responsibility. This can be something that's more than 2 consecutive days without an overnight stay, or that does involve overnight stays. We'll kind of get into that a little bit. And also talking about providing supervision, instruction, and or recreation where the children are apart from their parents, okay? So here's a better definition, I think. So camps and programs, which are defined in the broadest sense of the words, it's key to understand the difference between them. And it's more than 2 consecutive days or an overnight. That would consist of a camp. And again, full supervisory responsibility. There's no parents or guardians there to monitor the kids' behavior. And it applies to all Texas camps and programs for managers. So all of these examples are where you would have legal mandates and you would have things to follow regarding guidelines to youth protection. All right. So what about camps and programs that are not consecutive or not overnight? The guidelines and procedures outline best practices to use in any program. So while the requirements are not mandatory, they are useful in guiding any program delivery addressing the risk and liability. So even though they're not required here because it's not a consecutive day camp or an overnight camp, they still would be good in guiding you about addressing risk and liability. Now this page right here, I wish I would have had in your standard operating procedures manual because I think this would outline a wonderful addition, but I felt like it was going to be too much to add for the summer class, so I may do that going forward. But I was thinking about having this basically as your part of your EOMs to put into the manual and addressing each of these. So I'll let you look through these, and these are areas that you have to have documentation about how you're going to do these things, and you must be able to observe them as well. So let's talk about ADA and child protection with youth with disabilities and why it's important. So the ADA Act of 1990 is a federal anti-discrimination statute, and it's designed to ensure equal access to opportunities and benefits for qualified individuals with disabilities. It seeks to remove barriers from preventing qualified people with disabilities from enjoying the same programs and employment opportunities, independent living, economic self-sufficiency that's enjoyed by those without disabilities. So beyond just being the law, it's the right thing to do. And if you're going to be a youth serving organization receiving federal or state funding, you must abide by ADA statutes. So here's some additional information about the ADA, why it's important. So what does it mean for youth with special needs? All youth need opportunities to be involved in activities unique to their own talents and interests. This is a a central tenet of youth development that it doesn't matter who you are, all youth need those opportunities. And so, therefore, youth organizations they can be empowering pathways for youth uh, because the youth with disabilities sometimes don't necessarily aren't able to take advantage. So when you can provide opportunities that they feel involved, when you provide opportunities and programs that allow them to form friendships or gain life skills, again, this is doing the right thing. So it's important to remember that youth with disabilities really just want to be able to participate and have fun, just like every other youth. And it's your responsibility and your staff's responsibility and challenge sometimes to figure out how to make that happen. Therefore, what is a disability? Um, with the extreme variability in disabilities, it's a mistake to make broad assumptions about the individuals or groups of people. But here are some guiding ideas that a disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one of the major life activities like seeing, hearing, dressing, feeding, learning, or playing. It's important to note that while youth may have the impairment in one area, they may also have exceptional talents in others. These are just a few of the disabilities you may experience as an administrator. It's important to research more about them once you're aware of a condition. I'm not going to go over all of these, but you can read through some of the more common ones that occur in programming for individuals. So when you prepare to work with youth, especially in your media guides or if requests to medias are made, um, you need to have a statement expressing your 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 proactive guide to how you work with individuals with disabilities. So here you'll see like if you were sending out an electronic question, not a questionnaire, like a media guide or something, you were trying to promote your camp as a pamphlet. In part of the registration, you may see something like this, where it says if you need any type of accommodation to participate in the program, or if you have questions about physical access, you see that they provide opportunities to give names and numbers, and gives you a time frame in which this is happening. So this is a good way to allow conversations from all parties to go back and forth before the event happens. All right, so a youth organization may not have the resources to honor the request, causing an undue hardship, such as extreme costly adaptations to the building or equipment, and the ADA covers that. But it's also important to consider the safety of all participants when making this accommodation decision. So again, looking through these four bullet points, you can kind of see how things may happen. If a parent or guardian requests an accommodation, ask him or her what they feel would be helpful. Offer a reasonable accommodation. Again, you may not be able to, but you want to have a positive experience or you want the child to have a positive experience. So you need to do all that you can do that doesn't create a undue hardship on you or your organization, but still provides that positive experience for a child. Consider each case individually. That's the best way to go about handling those concerns. And allowing a caregiver, sibling, or older teen to volunteer and assist, um, or consider adjusting, eliminating the cost of registration, meals, and lodging. These are often less burdensome than the 24/7 assistance from a professional provider. So instead of you providing the care 24/7 in that way, you may say, hey, if you bring your own sibling or caregiver or something like that, we won't charge them any camp fees if they provide the assistance that that person with disabilities may need. Here are some additional information. So it talks about creating a welcoming, accepted, secure environment, including members with disabilities by accepting them as young people and having they may have same needs and interests and challenges as other youth. So don't forget that. Learn about the child's disability to better understand their abilities and limitations, And remember that each person has a chronological, emotional, and social age, and given their level of physical development and capabilities, they obviously could be different. And so having a mindset that they may not follow that standard ages and stages section. Treat each child independently as they should once you know more about them. You may have noticed, you may not have noticed, I try to use people first language when I talk about youth with disabilities. You want to say the person or the child with the disability, not the disabled child. So he or she has a cognitive disability, is not he is mentally challenged. Or he or she has Down syndrome, is not a Down's child. Those are examples of not what to do. He or she's a child who needs assistance, not as he has special needs. And that quite often is used more readily than some of the others. So you have to be careful about that one, especially the special needs one. And lastly, it's he or she uses a wheelchair, not he or she is wheelchair bound. So people first language focuses on the child rather than the disability. And you can carry that into all instances of your life. Always recognize the person first, and whatever the identifier is second. So it's not productive to have different expectations for children with disabilities than able-bodied children if both groups are capable of following them. So behavior expectations is an example. So using behavior modification techniques when needed could be similar for both children with disabilities as well as able-bodied children. Just want you to look through there for those examples. So what is Title IX? Title IX of the Federal Education Amendment of 1972, it prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in any educational program or activity that receives federal funding. So we're not going into the in-depth part of Title IX, but this is just a brief overview. So you can't deny someone educational program or activities just because of sex if they receive federal funding. So what does that mean? Title IX applies to all programs that receive federal funding, like I said. So going to college here, you may receive a federal grant. Not necessarily you, but students in general may receive federal grant funding. And so therefore A&M receives federal funding, therefore they must be in line and be eligible to say that they're following Title IX guidelines. So youth programs should review and eliminate any practices that limit, deprive, or tend to deprive youth of any opportunities based on gender, as well as, while may not necessarily be discussed in Title IX, programs should also review how all programming efforts may be discriminatory based on race, color, sex, religion, national origin, age, disability, genetic information, veteran status, that would deprive youth of their educational opportunities. This is key and real to understanding discrimination based on gender, and one gender-based group or individuals being afforded opportunities when others are not. So the practice of arranging competitions or awarding trips or other awards or scholarship on the basis of male-female categories is not an acceptable practice in youth development programs. Requirements for competitions must provide equal access for all youth and cannot be designed to create barriers for participation. And programs may not accept sponsorships, donations, or awards that are based on these discriminatory practices. So that's a continuation. What about awards for male and females then? So contests based on member participation and/or records of achievement which involve the outcome or impact of educational programs and knowledge are not appropriate for gender-based selection and are not exempt from Title IX. This means gender is not an acceptable criteria to use as a means of classification or determination in awards. Contests such as fair, king, or queen, which are based on a combination of factors related to personal appearance, poise, and the talent of participants, are permissible and they are exempt from Title IX because they're more than just gender based. So, what about activities involving ongoing physical contact? Public schools and private schools have chosen to allow boys and girls to participate in what was once considered to be a primarily male or female sport. This can be wrestling, football, cheerleading, soccer, and it's okay to limit participation in activities involving ongoing physical contact, but within Title. So, what about clubs that only attract members of one sex? If all reasonable efforts are made to advertise and attract diverse membership, the choice to belong is based on interest and not considered to be the result of exclusionary member policies, then you're okay. However, programs should make an effort to provide diversity in the types of programs they offer. The key is opportunity. Was there real opportunity to participate? And again, if it's private and it doesn't receive federal funding, then the guidelines are different. But if it's going to be a public entity, you have to continue to follow Title IX guidelines. So, what about other things to consider? The need to look further and consider sexual harassment and review of your programs. Activities seen by some as harmless pranks could be viewed as sexual harassment. And sexual harassment, including sexual violence, is a form of sex discrimination and therefore prohibited under Title IX. If one gender group or individual chooses to target another person or persons of another gender to the degree that a child cannot successfully participate in the educational program, then it can be viewed as discrimination. And here are some examples of what sexual harassment is, such as inappropriate touching, patting or hugging, non-consensual sexual activity, invasion of sexual privacy, seeing phone calls, text, emails, photographs, anything that interferes with the participant's education, whether it's in person or electronic form, that falls under those examples. But it's not necessarily limited to the bullying, hazing, or cyberbullying, but those are quite common. And these guidelines are regarding the contact, communication, and association that must be shared between participants and the staff. So here are some things that, if you know, you should take action. So turning a blind eye or providing inadequate supervision of these examples is not acceptable. Saying things like boys must be boys or just mean girls, they're not acceptable. It's a cop-out and it's a way to avoid responsibility for not stepping up and intervening in inappropriate actions. If you know or suspect sexual harassment, bullying, hazing, or cyberbullying, or any other form of inappropriate activity, it's your responsibility to do something about it and respond. And remember, there's a clear legal division between adults and minors and the legal ramifications of the actions between them. So while we, as youth development professionals, often talk about the span of diversity within development and how you may develop earlier or later than some, there is a legal defining mark, and that is those who are 18 years old and still in a youth program. So at 18, it makes a big difference. So what can you do? You should pay attention, observe, and listen and act. You should, again, have a proactive approach so others understand what is appropriate and what's not. You should set clear boundaries and expectations as well as those consequences. And then you should recognize and reward positive behavior and address the problems as they come up. What is your responsibility then? You should think about limiting unstructured and unsupervised free time. Exploring the situation, leaders often suspect something is amiss but are reluctant to act, so you need to if you feel like something's not correct, take a look at it. Follow through with the consequences for negative behavior. Many people do not like conflict, and that can be an issue, and it can keep you from acting appropriately, and it may be if you don't act, you're putting someone else and the youth in harm's way. And so it's your responsibility to act if you're going to be in that position. You should keep a written record of the situation and follow up to make sure that everything is resolved. And one of the more important things is to maintain confidentiality. So youth will often say that they want more free time, but this is an inappropriate action. But there are inappropriate actions that can take place. So consistent expectations and follow-ups are critical in preventing situations from getting out of hand. Those are just some kind of caveats I think that are useful in looking at some of these examples. What if I follow all of this and something still happens? You can obviously call 911 and get emergency help. If the person has cause to believe there's an abuse or neglect, the first report should always be to law enforcement. Go from there. So while similar, each state has different procedures that they must be followed, so know yours and train your staff on how to follow them. What if I follow all of this and something still happens? Well, you want to, again, maintain that confidentiality and instruct your leaders to do the same. Complete your required paperwork, including a summary of the event. And then refer your media inquiries to an agency-identified spokesperson. So generally, you as a person who's a manager, depending on the size of your organization, there's generally one person or a group of people who are designated with the task of speaking for your organization. So if media comes in and starts asking questions, you don't want your staff to be necessarily stepping up to answer those questions. You have to worry about your reputational risk that we talked about in a previous lecture. So generally you want to have your staff trained well enough that says, well, if you have questions related to this incident, then you'll need to speak with so-and-so, or you'll need to speak with the so-and-so department in order to handle that. Practicum 12, you will look under Module 12 and find the file that is titled Practicum 12 Program Jeopardy for Real. So what I'm looking for you to do here is to complete the worksheet, and then you can submit it by uploading. It's not busy work. It's actually a file that I think is going to be very good for you. The purpose of the assignment is for you to be able to kind of recall some of this information that would be helpful in a program setting, because some of these things you need to know off the top of your head. As also, it needs to assist in your skills in finding and applying information when you don't know it off, when it's not readily available to you. So this week, the end of module practicum, I'm going to have you do. I'm going to, so for the Module 12 EOM, this should be a short assignment. This is kind of wrapping up your standing operating procedures. What I want you to do is understand that you're putting your program in real jeopardy from lawsuits and negative press if you're not aware of the legal and ethical mandates related to ADA, Title IX, and child protection. So what I want you to do is to see the example in the module folder and create your own specific camp-related statements to ADA, Title IX, and child protection. So this shouldn't take more than a page and a half. And I want you to write an ADA specific statement, then write a Title IX specific statement, and then a child protection specific statement related to your camp and how you're going to handle those things. All right? If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. Good luck.